There we go. We're
Yay.
starting. All right. Episode 11. On episode 11
Crazy.
of Grit Daily Dose with E Squared. As always, do our little intro. We like to be a one stop shop for science and experience based knowledge on supplements, nutrition, exercise, lifestyle. Really, just to bring you guys an honest education to hopefully help you along in the way towards whatever goals you may have. I know we started this one a little late today because of my
Internet.
internet dumbness. So we'll see how this goes, and hopefully everything's nice and clear.
Hopefully, we'll see.
But today's topic is about menstrual cycles and its possible effects, if any, on training and performance. And so Emma's got the gnarly lead on this one, savage with it. And so I'm going to let her take it from here, and I'm going to jump in with at any point, maybe knowledge that I have or studies that I've looked at as well. So take it away, Emma.
Cool. So I figured the easiest way to go about this is just start from the basics and kind of work up from there. Explain the different steps of a menstrual cycle. There are 4 phases, if you didn't know. And I have kind of a lot of charts that I'll try to pull up in a swift manner as well. So the first thing I wanted to start with is that it is insane how much education is not based around understanding menstrual cycles and ovulation and things like that. I had a period for maybe a decade before I learned that there were different phases. I just thought I survived for a week and then I was thriving for the other 3 weeks. There's actually phases of a period and a menstrual cycle and all that stuff. So I'm going to see if I can just pull up. I found this awesome blog that had really cool visuals, and I'm a visual person. So, but to kind of start off, an average menstrual cycle for a woman is 28 days. Obviously, that can vary by usually 3 or 4 days. It starts the first day of the period and then ends the day before the next period starts. So I wanted to share, let's see, share screen. Yes. There we go. Can't remember if I need to.
There we go.
Sharing. Cool. All right. So I wanted to kind of walk through this thing first. So phases of menstrual cycle, I like how they kind of broke it down because it kind of floats around the ovulation. The cycle itself, there is a ovarian cycle, pre-ovulation, post-ovulation. The follicular phase kind of goes all through the period, usually which lasts, anywhere from 4 to 7 days. And then the proliferative phase. And then post-ovulation is the luteal phase or the secretory phase. So actually, I had never even heard of these terms until I started really diving in. I've heard a lot of the overarching, obviously the menstrual, the ovulation, follicular, and luteal are the more 4 overarching ones. But I liked how that they use these other terms. So I'm going to stop sharing, get back to my notes, and kind of explain that side of things. I'm going to see if I can pull up both. I've got to rearrange my screens here. Give me a second. So I want to be able to talk through it and share. Should have had this ready before.
That's all right. We're going to dive into kind of explaining a little bit more in detail of the stages of a menstrual cycle, and then we're kind of talking about studies on if any effects it has when it comes to our training.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to break down the different phases is because hormones at different phases are kind of always changing, and depending on where you're at in your cycle. So can you see my screen here?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So the first cycle that I kind of wanted to talk about was this uterine phase. As you can see kind of here, there's this week-long period. You can see it lasts probably, around 7 days, most do. So the menstrual cycle, the period, the shedding of the uterus lining called the endometrium. This can last anywhere from 5 to 7 days on average, and levels of estrogen and progesterone are typically at their lowest. So hormones are really low in this part. That's why a lot of people are tired. They're losing iron. They're bleeding. They're
Hmm.
not usually feeling great. The proliferative phase was an interesting one. Like I said, I hadn't heard of this specific term before, but it goes from the end of the period until ovulation. Proliferative means growing quickly. So the uterus builds up a quick or a thick inner lining while the ovaries prepare eggs for release. So it's kind of that middle period of right after you've shed the lining, your uterus is building back up to ovulate and hopefully become pregnant, right? That's what your body's working on. So um, if you're not wanting to become pregnant, then let's yeah, so we don't want that. So estrogen is typically rising during this phase, and that's actually what kind of signals the uterus lining to grow. The next thing I wanted to look at was the ovarian cycle. Um, so we're going to be looking at this follicular phase right here from the start of the period until ovulation. So this covers both period and the proliferative phase. Um, the hypothalamus in our brain signals to our pituitary glands to release a follicle stimulating hormone, otherwise known as FSH. And this hormone stimulates our ovaries to produce anywhere from 5 to 20 small little sacs called follicles. And within these follicles are an immature egg, usually only one, sometimes, two, can become the dominant. And then that's the egg that's released during ovulation. So this usually lasts between day like 10 to 20, 10 to 22, give or take a few days. And then there is our ovulation stage that we're hitting. So around 13 to 15 days before the start of the next period, we ovulate. So halfway through the menstrual cycle, the dominant follicle actually grows and bursts and then sends an egg from the ovary to the fallopian tube. Um, so the dominant follicle in the ovary produces more and more estrogen as it grows. And when the estrogen levels are high enough, they send a signal to the brain, and the brain then causes a dramatic increase in luteinizing hormone, which is LH. And if any of you watching have tried to track your ovulation or are trying to get pregnant or have before, there's things called LH strips. You pee on them or you stick it in a cup of pee, and then if it's positive, then that usually is a good indication of ovulation. So that's where that LH term comes from. This spike is what causes the release of the egg to occur, and then estrogen levels drop drastically right after ovulation. So it's interesting to hear about the different stages and then why certain levels of hormones are important. And then also paying attention to not only does understanding your hormones help you kind of respect what your body might be going through at a certain point, but also if your hormones are off, if you have too much estrogen, too much testosterone, not enough of this, not enough of that, maybe your body is struggling maybe that's if you struggle to get pregnant or your periods are super, super bad. Like there might be a hormonal imbalance causing that issue. So because hormones are quite literally in charge of this whole process here. So kind of walking down to this complete menstrual cycle, I just love how colorful this is. And I really like how it also includes the lines of the follicle stimulating hormones right here, estrogen, LH, progesterone. So it kind of just shows you specific areas where your body is working through, especially in that specific period of the cycle. So the secretory phase from ovulation until the start of the next period. So anywhere from, what is that, like almost 2 weeks, basically. The endometrium gets ready to support a pregnancy or gets ready to break down for menstruation. So this is right after ovulation. The progesterone rises, causing the uterus lining to stop thickening and prepare for a fertilized egg. So at first, in the proliferative phase, there was a lot of estrogen, and that's what was making the uterus build up a lining. And then right after, progesterone rises, and that makes it stop thickening, and it gets your your uterus ready for fertilizing an egg. What is that face for? Did you have a
Well,
question?
I just find it funny that you're talking about the increase in uh, progesterone, because one of the studies that I had looked at was see if there's a correlation between the possibility of muscle protein synthesis in
Mhm.
females, and see if it paralleled the difference in see if it paralleled the changes in the
The horm.
ovarian hormones.
Oh, interesting.
And so what they found is that progesterone possibly could have an effect in regulating the growth of fat-free mass, on like a skeletal um, fat-free mass in throughout the process of muscle protein synthesis.
Mm.
It could have an effect.
Yeah.
Now, it being in a sense of when you say there's an increase in progesterone to stop the growth,
Yeah.
this increase in progesterone could probably have a negative effect on the possible growth of muscle mass
Hmm.
in females.
So you're
Could.
saying if someone were to really have this goal of building muscle mass, they
Yeah.
might find a slower period if they were able to find a way to track how much based on the week, right?
Right.
That's reliable, a
Right.
reliable tracking measure. They might find that muscle mass might slow in that period.
Right. Um,
Interesting.
but also, this was the first study of its kind.
And a lot of studies are so unsure, like a lot. And I kind of talk about it later, but like some the studies that we can look at are like, well,
It
this
makes you like go,
person, yeah,
like,
like everyone's so different. You can't
right.
really know for sure.
Right.
So that's interesting though. I'd be curious to.
But you're also talking about a short window of time.
It's one. I mean, it's 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And of course, it's every month. But I assume
And how
that,
drastic is that?
yeah, yeah, especially if you're eating and you have like this very similar, you're like eating enough and you've
Right.
been in the same kind of training cycle,
Right.
like unless you're introducing something very new, I don't really think that the change would be enough to really like stop any and all growth or changes. So,
Significantly, yeah, at least.
yeah,
But yeah, you continue. Sorry.
okay, no, that was interesting. I like that. And I feel like that is another peek into how many different directions you can go with this topic. So that's why I wanted to keep it simple, and kind of explain the different phases and just really help people understand like there's a lot going on in a woman's body every day. Um,
Hmm.
and so, because for men, like every day, there's a peak in testosterone, it kind of rides out, and then another peak. And for women, it's like woo, like all day long, like different phases. Every week is different. So, and every woman feels different in every phase, even though they say, yeah, this phase you might feel great. Like for me, it's always felt opposite. So, I it could very well depend on my hormone health as well. So, the last thing would be the luteal phase from ovulation until the start of the next period. That lasts around 9 to 16 days. After ovulation, the follicle that held the egg turns into something called a corpus luteum or luteum. Um, I feel like that's a really nice way of just saying it, like dies. It deceases. It's deceased. And it makes progesterone and estrogen to support pregnancy. So if no pregnancy occurs, the corpus luteum breaks down between 9 to 11 days after ovulation. And progesterone supports early pregnancy, but if no pregnancy happens, the peak then drops. So that's why you can see kind of in this chart, if no pregnancy happens by then, it's a pretty gnarly drop off at the end there. But progesterone is also a really amazing hormone that I've seen a lot of friends and family members use to heal a lot of hormone issues. So if you're someone who's really struggles with hormone or thyroid or anything like that, maybe ask your doctor about progesterone. There's another one too, progesterone, and
Is that
starts with P. I don't know. I'll have to ask my sister because she uses it and she's progesterone, and then like on her period she uses something different. I should have asked her before. It's really interesting how well it's worked for her. So So all of the hormone changes, like I said, that like pretty drastic drop off of progesterone, that can be a big reason why women have PMS. So a lot of cramping or sore boobs or just being like pissed at the world. That's usually a big indication because hormones are just kind of dropping off and getting ready to start your period. So all that to say, I think that's all I needed to share in terms of my screen. Um, now that you understand all the things about periods and the steps, so some people will recommend, you'll see, especially on like Instagram, you know, different social media sites, they'll be like, hey, here's how you cycle sync in your workouts. It's one of those like fancy terms that you're like, is this real or not? It sounds fun, it sounds fancy, it sounds special, but is it actually legit? So if you were to cycle sync or look up how to cycle sync with my period, it would look, or with my cycle, this is something what it would look like. So with your menstrual cycle, you would engage in gentle and restorative movements like walking, yoga, mobility, and low impact strength training. Estrogen and progesterone are low, cortisol is high, and your body is losing nutrients, blood, energy, all that stuff. Follicular phase, you should engage in high intensity workouts. Any kind of metabolic conditioning, CrossFit, running, swimming, all that stuff. Your energy is rising, your cortisol is lowering, and your FSH, so that follicle stimulating hormone, is being released. So estrogen and testosterone are slowly rising during that period. Ovulatory phase, sex hormones are at their peak, so you're feeling great, gives you lots of energy, stamina. Your high intensity workouts are just hitting right. You know, so you got HIIT, you got CrossFit, you got cardio, all the things, right? Then your luteal phase, the week before you start your period, that's going to be your like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all that stuff is like starting to taper off. They're still kind of high at the start, but then obviously, like we said, if no pregnancy happens, then your body gets ready to menstruate. So then your levels, so that's a very like, you maybe could start that week with strength training and then maybe finish it off with yoga. This is where I've always said that my body feels opposite. So for me, I feel awesome on my period and I can destroy anyone in my way. I'm like ready to go. The week after is where I'm like, I just want to lay in bed, I want to take a nap, and I want to cry. Like that's where, you know, and then usually ovulation and luteal are kind of just like, I feel fine. I'm just preparing for the next time I'm ready, you know, like it's just kind of, but those are really what I found is where it kind of flips. So that's where it can get tricky because some people read that and they're like, oh, well, should I feel a different way? Right. And sometimes your body just does what it wants, the way it wants to do it. Right. So I wanted to cite BioLane's research review. He has something called REPS. EJ sends it to me every week. It's awesome. It stands for Research Explained in Practical Summaries. This one specifically is from Volume 2, Issue 11. Menstrual cycle and lifting. Does it really matter? So what did they test? The authors reviewed the current literature of effects of women's cycles on lifting performance and adaptations. So does your cycle affect your performance, your adaptations, your muscle mass, how you feel, things like that? What did they find? So they found that menstrual cycles don't have any meaningful impact on strength performance or resistance exercise adaptations. Additionally, commonly cited studies that support adjusting training based on each phase of the menstrual cycle are seriously limited and should be interpreted carefully or cautiously. So what does that mean for you? You don't need to train in any pre-adjusted way in regards to your cycle. Listen to your body and adjust to what your body needs at that moment. So we know that the major decrease in hormones that occurs during and after menopause can impact muscle mass and performance. So this summary really is just asking, like, we know that some crazy stuff happens in menopause before and after, right? Especially like muscle mass drops off at a rate of like 6% or something crazy after menopause. So really this summary is just saying, like, is that a area of concern with women who are actively menstruating? So The summary has a lot of content describing why the studies weren't really sound. So like the testing pool wasn't long enough, and this is kind of what we mentioned before. Like the like tests weren't long enough. There wasn't any intensity or load increasing, so they couldn't tell, like kind of what I said, if they had found a way to like measure muscle mass gain or something every week or every few days, and then they found maybe during that time of progesterone that a spike that it slowed down. There was no, in these studies, there was no like real intensity increasing in their training. The cycle phases weren't similar enough. So some people were in different stages of their cycle and they just weren't really tracking that difference. Some participants were even taking birth control, which, even if you're for birth control, which I do not prefer birth control, that's like the nice way to put it. You know that how much of effect it can have on your hormones. So it's kind of crazy that they would even let. I would understand taking, like doing a separate study on birth control, but like you are not, your body is not your body on birth control, and that's the point of it. So
you're
it literally
essentially counting like it's you're like you said, you're introducing hormones into your body. You can't account that as being equal to people who are not on birth control.
And my thing was like, people always ask me like, Emma, why do you not like birth control, or why don't you do it, or whatever? And I'm like, if we are born to do something and we're taking a pill or inserting something into our arm, or like to stop that thing from happening, that seems odd to me, like that it would be such a normal thing, right? Like, so to me, I'm like, I think that even though yes, having a period can be a pain, my body needs to do that for a reason. So I'm just going to learn how to work with it. I'm going to eat good food. I'm going to support it in every way that I can. And I'm just, not going to let it run my life. So, but to kind of go back, there weren't a lot of the studies just weren't really reliable in terms of all of the things that went into it. Which it would be hard, I'm sure, to find people that are like in the same phase of their cycle and doing this kind of general, like same training modalities that are, increasing in intensity. I could see why it could be tricky. But overall, there's no overwhelming science stating that you need to structure your training around your cycle. So the best is to listen to your body, figure out how your body feels. I mean, even if you give it a quick Google search, like I think I literally typed in because I was curious of what would come up. Is cycle syncing legit? That's just all I said. And like a New York Times article came up and said there's no good evidence for it. So that might be a little bit, no good evidence might be like a little bit of a reach. There might be some evidence that people can find where you slow down. But I think at the end of the day, people need to realize that your body is going, or like a woman's body is going through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Hormones really are at just like, gut health and things like that. And like having your pituitary glands and involved as well. Like that just kind of shows you how they all are connected. So hormones can be really at the root of how your body functions. And if you're not respecting that and giving your body like time and rest, then definitely things can go downhill. So I would say the tricky part is like there are some people that are training specifically for a certain thing. So you're you're a games athlete. And for most of the year, doesn't feel good to train that hard that day. That's fine. You can just switch your training around. But you hit what, June, July?
Yep.
The games are early August. You think you're going to take a day off of your 8-hour workout days because you feel bad?
Right.
No. So certain training structure is going to require like sometimes you push against what your body wants, and that's okay. But I would definitely recommend most of your year is spent in homeostasis at one with your body, eating lots of food and, resting when you need to, taking an extra rest day. maybe a rest day completely where you sleep an extra 2 hours, or just go on a walk or
Right.
walk, run, or whatever. So I think cycle syncing for me personally is another one of those fads that are meant to overwhelm people who just want to try to get healthy.
Yep.
Does it mean that you shouldn't listen to your body at all? No. I just think cycle syncing, as soon as I heard that term, I was like, sounds weird.
Clickbait.
So yeah, clickbait. It's one of those, uh, just fad things. So, but that's coming from me personally. I don't know, EJ, if you've had much experience with
I've had
people trying to do that or what.
not necessarily cycle syncing. I've had more often than not when I've had clients, especially when I first really got deep into personal training. It was more or less we talk about the cycles coming up. My period's about to start. Okay, well, how's that supposed to change for your training? Well, my muscles are a lot more sore. I got cramps, and my joints even hurt too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, while there is actually some evidence to show uh, hormone variance with women in their cycles when it comes to like elasticity within our tendons and joints.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's
Especially
some
like during
studies.
pregnancy, like
Yeah.
there's that hormone relaxin, which is
Yep.
flooded into your system to prepare you for giving birth. And even when you're breastfeeding, that can still be very prominent. So it's very interesting how your joints can change. Do you think I'm curious to see if there's a number on like how much inflammation increases at certain points. Because
Mm.
that could also be a reason why some of your clients might be like, oh, my joints hurt, or I'm not recovering
Um,
as well.
I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question.
I feel
But
like I'm going to come out of this episode
yeah,
having more questions.
that's great. More stuff for us to look up.
Yes.
But aside from possible, the joint and tendon stiffness or possible inflammation, uh, having abdominal cramps or cramps in that region um, is very dependent, like on person to person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are dealing with it, depending on the severity, okay, yeah, sure, take those extra days. But if you have big goals in mind, are you going to let that push you aside and stop you from achieving those goals?
And so many times, exercise and like pushing your body can be the thing that helps you with it.
Right.
So for me, like I'm still breastfeeding, so my cycle's kind of whack, but I had like an actual somewhat of a cycle this last month, and I got hit with period cramps for the first time in like a year and a half, since like getting pregnant, having the kid, and I was like, oh, and I went to work out, and I mean, yeah, sure, I felt crampy later that day, but like I mean, getting that oxytocin and just all those feel good hormones can be so amazing for, and obviously taking like magnesium and things that'll kind of support your body through that and
Right.
get your muscles to kind of relax. But a lot of times people, will resort to eating a bunch of junk food and laying in bed when what they need to do is eat nutrient dense food, red
Yeah.
meat to restore your iron, stay active, get out in the sunlight if you can. Like there are things to do that make you feel better. And a lot of times what's pushed is the things that'll make you feel worse.
Right.
So,
More often than not, what we see is that it's more of a mindset.
mhm.
Like you're letting, this is one of the things I want to talk about, that menstrual cycling is that it's so easy to lean on that. And now you can start following it. And now, because you're saying, well, I got to cycle my training depending on my menstruation and when my period's going to happen. I know I'm going to have cramps. So I got to change it. What if
It's
your
just like
cramps aren't
making
going to
your,
be even as severe? And now you're going to
yeah,
start sending signals to those areas.
it's like tricking your body to do something it might not
Exactly.
even do. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
so that's why I'm not always conducive with like,
Well,
yeah. Go
And
ahead.
I think the smart way to train is having a specific goal. Like the people who always have an issue with their fitness or their personal appearance are doing random things.
Hmm.
Like I'm all for doing the fitness that you love. So if it's not, maybe it's CrossFit, maybe if it's not CrossFit, if it's lifting alone in a, Globo gym, if it's cardio, if it's Zumba, if it's power hour at your local gym, like whatever it is, um, rock climbing, skiing, like there can literally be anything. But to me, it's like if you want to get better at that one thing or get fitter, you need to be progressively overloading it over time. So if you every week you change, like that cycle syncing recommendation said, if it was like this week you walk, and this week you do CrossFit, and this week you do cardio, and this week, like you are literally never getting better at any of those things because you're just doing everything different every day, every week. And most of the time, like a normal strength cycle will be 4 to 8 weeks, depending on what the lift and the intensity is. So if I'm like heavy squatting on my follicular phase because I feel good, but then I don't squat again for another month, am I really going to get better?
Right.
So, but that is an interesting point that you make of like, you're kind of, if you're anticipating that your body's going to feel a certain way, that doesn't mean it will, but a lot of times you're kind of making your body feel that way because you're just assuming it will.
Right. It's the same thing of like when it gets to nutrition. Like you said, when you get those signals and you want to be on your period and you go, oh, I just want to eat food that's going to be comfort food for me, and people eat junk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, like you said, have goals in mind and eat for those goals. Don't. It's okay if you want to like indulge a little bit, but don't just go, oh, I'm on my period. I'm just going to eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
Because that is a sorry excuse.
Yeah. The,
Um,
the
yeah.
thing is you're, you have a peer. Like it's like, you got to do the work to find what works for people. Like you can't just constantly sit around and complain about the fact that you have a period.
Yep.
You got one, you're going to have one for a long time. You might as well figure out a way to like train with it, listen to your body. Like I said, my body's opposite. My period, I feel great. I eat so healthy. I have so much energy. My sleep is amazing. My exercise is amazing. Um, my period was last week, so this week I feel like a dumpster fire. I'm tired. I'm not recovering. All I want is chocolate, but I gave up sugar 4 weeks ago, so I can't have that. Like I mean, anything. Someone cuts me off at a stop sign. Normally, I'm like, chill. This was the week I start fist fighting. Like it's nuts. So every week is going to be different. Every person is going to be different. You just have to find a way to adjust based on what feels good for you. So um,
Absolutely.
I do feel like we need to do more of these like myth busting episodes because it might be fun to really like see which topics not only that we just go like crazy on, but at the same time, like there were things in here that I didn't even know.
Right.
And I've been having a period for 13 years.
Mm.
So it's kind of crazy how much you can learn based on that. So cycle syncing, a fad.
If you want to do it, go ahead.
If
Whatever.
it makes you happy,
If that
sure.
floats your boat, go for it.
I mean, to me, I'm like, at least you're exercising. But
Yes.
it's just another thing to stress out about. I would just
Right.
say do what you can, eat healthy food that'll support your body where you're
Mm-hmm.
at. It is important. I'm not saying cycle syncing's trash, so don't learn anything about your menstrual cycle. Learn about your menstrual cycle, figure out what hormones are going to be going crazy at certain times, figure out what foods, lifestyle practices, and then supplements would help, right?
Yep.
Um, if you are someone who struggles with endometriosis, PCOS, that's a completely different story. So I wouldn't say completely disregard what we said, but there are certain things.
Yeah. There are always exceptions.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, that's all I got today. I feel like that was,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Great job, Emma.
Mm.
Great topic of discussion for today. Do you guys like what you're hearing? Uh, give us comments, give us likes, subscribe, follow. We're always looking for additional topics to talk about. If you want us to research something and talk about it, email us. You can contact my direct email at nutrition at 346grit CrossFit, or you can hit us at our. I'm always bad at this. This
I
one,
figured these are Instagrams.
Instagram.
Instagrams.
Yep, contact, DM us there. As I said again, you can always comment in the videos. So appreciate you guys taking the time to join us tonight. Be well, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Okay, bye.
Bye.